Welcome to the You Can Mentor podcast. It's your favorite mentoring friend, Zach, and I am here with my friend, Mr. Brad Griffin. Brad, say hi.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks, Zach.
Well, thanks, Brad. It is delightful to have you here, my man. So I'm excited to catch up with you and hear all of the fun things that you guys have going on, and here to talk about your book. So,
Yeah.
um, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us about who you are, your family, what you like to do. Paint a picture of who is Brad.
Yeah. All right. That's great. So I'm Brad. I live in Pasadena, California, in Northeast LA. I've been here about 20 years. Before that, I grew up in Central Kentucky, actually. So have some experience in different parts of the country. I'm married to a middle school math teacher. So math teachers are mentors too, right? Uh, and I'm a longtime youth worker. We have 3 kids, so they are now 22, 19, and 16. So we're officially in 3 different phases with post college, college, and high school with our kids. So that's super fun. Um, I am on volunteer pastoral team at my church and do some preaching and other work. I also work a lot with teenagers, so I love working with middle schoolers, high schoolers in that capacity. And then my day job is with the Fuller Youth Institute, and we're a research and resourcing organization connected with Fuller Seminary. And our mission is equipping diverse leaders, parents, mentors, so faithful young people can change our world. So I'm going to be talking more about what we do there in our conversation. But kind of the highlight of that is I just think about young people a lot. I think about their journeys and their lives, and just am so privileged to get to research and talk about that with folks. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's me in a nutshell, man.
Man, so tell me the biggest difference between Kentucky and California.
Um, Kentucky is a lot greener,
Okay.
at least than our part of California. California is a very diverse landscape. You could fit several Kentuckys in California. But especially down here, we're kind of in a desert climate, honestly. We're like in a desert by the ocean. And so Kentucky is so green and rolling hills. Kentucky's a lot more humid. It's a lot drier here. So those are the big differences. I gotta say, people, there are good and beautiful people everywhere I go in the U.S., and that's certainly true in Kentucky and California. Um, yeah, those are some of the biggest differences. Yeah.
So back in college, I'm a Texas boy, haven't really gone outside of Texas a ton. And I went on a mission trip during spring break to San Francisco. And I'm thinking in my head, California, Los Angeles, like sunny beaches, it's going to be 75 degrees. And I packed nothing but like a bunch of like tank tops and a bunch of shorts. And Brad, I almost froze to death. I was like, what is this area? And they're like, oh, that's Los Angeles. That's warm, not San Francisco. It was like freezing cold out there, but it was good.
Yeah, it is cold up there. Yeah, you gotta California it's got a lot. It's got a lot. I'll tell you what we don't have though. This is the big difference is sweet tea. Kentucky has a lot more sweet tea than California.
Yeah, just oceans, oceans of sweet tea. Yeah, for sure. Um, okay, I'm gonna ask you kind of a uh different question, but can you paint a picture of yourself as a teenager?
Yeah. I was well, depends on which year.
Okay.
Awkwardly trying to figure it out. I One of the things that I think about a lot about me as a teenager is certainly I was trying to figure out who I was, um, but very much in the context uh, of where I belonged. So I actually grew up on a farm, and I grew up on a farm, but in a community where most of my classmates grew up in town in neighborhoods, and so they would walk to each other's houses and play basketball, or like go hang out at the country club and swim and whatever. And I didn't do those things. And so I was constantly feeling like an outsider and struggling to figure out where I fit. So that was my biggest struggle in high school. Um, and actually one of the huge factors that ended up bringing me into a real relationship with Christ was belonging. I wanted to belong to a group of people, and there was it was actually through a club at my school. I mean, it was through the parachurch that I really came to faith because um, I felt belonging there and friends who would accept me for who I was, and that was huge for me. I needed that. Yeah.
Man, I was the same way. I mean, my parents had just divorced. My mom had a hard enough time just kind of taking care of herself, and I just felt alone,
Mm,
and I was a big guy. At the time I was probably 6'6", but I was really skinny. I was like 165 and just kind of gangly and just kind of awkward. And I didn't really fit in with sports. I didn't really fit in with the cool kids. I for sure didn't fit in with the girls. And I was just lost, man. And I didn't have anyone there speaking identity into me. I didn't have a group of people that I felt like I could go to, that I felt like loved me. I mean, I think the thing that kept me on kind of the from falling off of the edges too far was definitely my church,
mm,
because it was the only place that I went where like I had a youth pastor who knew my name,
mm,
and like knew kind of my story some. And
mhm,
man, that's why I'm so excited to hear about this book. Is just like, if you guys have tuned into the You Can Mentor podcast, we talk a ton about IPC, identity, purpose, and community. And whenever I picked up this book, I was like, oh my gosh, this guy's on the same page as me. Like, we are speaking the same language. So why don't you tell us about this book? Tell us about the title, how it came to be, all of the good stuff.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'm really excited too. So the way we talk about identity, belonging, and purpose. So really, yeah, the same thing, but we just kind of switch that belonging and community. Those are interchangeable terms. And our team we're a research team, and so we really try to understand kind of an interdisciplinary way what's going on with young people and how adults can more faithfully walk with them. And so we're thinking about parents, guardians, youth leaders, mentors, teachers, anybody who interacts with a teenager. We want them to be better and more faithful at that work. And so this project grew out of wanting to understand and just listen to teenagers tell their own stories. And so we knew from research that's out there that identity, belonging, and purpose, these questions of who am I, where do I fit, and what difference can I make, or how will my life matter? These are what we call the three big questions. And so we actually have two books that came out of this project. One is for adults. It's called Three Big Questions That Change Every Teenager. And then the other book is for young people, and it's called Three Big Questions That Shape Your Future. And it's a little more of like a devotional book that could be used on your own or with a mentor. We really think it's best used with a mentor. So that's why I'm excited about this conversation. And it's all about exploring each of those questions and exploring how young people come up with or are given false, incomplete, or toxic answers to those questions. There are so many bad answers to to those questions. And then also how we can in our mentoring and our discipleship and our accompaniment with young people lead them towards better answers and Christ-centered answers, good news kinds of answers to those questions. Part of the big premise here is every teenager is a walking bundle of questions. If you've ever hung out with a teenager, they got all kinds of questions, and sometimes they're going to say them out loud, sometimes they're going to hold them in. But sometimes we have to draw them out, but we're not always coming to them with the questions that they're really asking. Sometimes we're giving them answers to questions that they don't care about. And, in really good mentoring, we're listening to their questions and we're listening for what we call the questions beneath the questions. And that's identity, belonging, and purpose.
And I think that that's so important. And I think one thing that's so fascinating to me, Brad, is these are the questions that I mean, I have worked with a ton of teenagers, and they're all asking these questions, but they haven't developed yet the skill to be able to articulate these important questions. So,
Mhm.
if you could just kind of share with me just kind of your experience of
Yeah.
how how do you start to engage teens with these kinds of such deep, authentic kind of topics, right? Like how do you kind of tiptoe into the water into these just absolutely massive topics, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's a really great question because, of course, it's not really fair to sit down with a teenager and say, "Well, who are you?" Tell me, "What's your sense of purpose?" Um, because they're probably gonna I mean, on any given day, like, let's just take identity, for example, and for a young person, I mean, especially a middle schooler, but also a high schooler, to for them to try to articulate, "Who am I?" They don't have a clue, and that answer might look different from day to day because that is part of the experience of adolescence. It's this sense of I'm trying on different identities. I'm kind of experimenting, I'm trying to figure out who I am, and even in a relationship with an adult, I might be testing out some things to see what kind of reaction I get from you. And so I think our best way in, if we really wanna listen for and engage these conversations, is to invite them to just be comfortable. and and what I mean there is, um, whenever an adult is interacting with a teenager, we're crossing a pretty big gap there, and the generation gaps are even bigger these days, than they used to be. I mean, that's real, and part of how it's real is there's a bigger trust gap across age groups and across generations. And so if you're 1 or 2 generations removed, the first thing that we have to do is establish this sense of am I mean, their first real question that they're not gonna ask, but that they're wondering is, "Can I trust you? Can I trust you?" And so I think to establish that trust, we've gotta show that we're interested in a real conversation, not just a conversation with an agenda. And so it's questions that help us get into, um, what's going on in your life right now, right? What's your week been like? I think we can't expect very deep conversations with young people, um, until we can establish we're curious about them. We're asking curious questions. What are you into these days? Oh, Fortnite. Tell me more about that. I don't really understand Fortnite, but help me understand. Like, what's that like? What do you do when you game with your friends? I think withholding judgment and showing that we care. And then here's the really important thing. The most important part is probably not that conversation, but the next conversation. When you engage that kid again, however many days later or the next week or whatever it is, that you remember and that you follow up. And so we come back and we follow up. Hey, you mentioned you were going to try out for that play. What happened? How'd it go? Or you had that big game coming up. Um, what was it like? And that um, we're engaging them in ways that show that we're listening, that we're curious, and that they can trust us because we remember, um, and care enough to remember who they are. By the way, this doesn't require having a really good memory. Like, I think we can use some cheat sheets here. We can take notes. It's a really good idea to sit down and write, or, if you use your, like, phone notes app, just type up a few notes for yourself from that conversation so that the next time you remember going into it, "Oh, yeah, here's what was going on." Here's what they were worried about or wondered about or excited about. And those touch points, they just keep building trust. And that's like the baseline before then we get to those deeper questions that are underneath. So that was a little bit of a long answer, but I think we've got to work our way there, would be the short answer.
And one of my favorite quotes in the book was that the Lord has created us to be in community with God and with others through Jesus. And that with, right?
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
so so often how kids experience Jesus is when they experience you. And I don't know too many things, Brad, that makes others experience Jesus than care. I mean, what Jesus did when he was on earth is he went to those who didn't belong. He went to those who, yeah, people might have had an identity, but it probably wasn't a very positive one, right? Who possibly didn't have a purpose. And Jesus went to them and he showed them that he cared. And it's exactly like what you said. He didn't have an agenda. He focused on them and their heart, not what he didn't have a one, two, three. He was curious. He cared. He didn't have judgment. And he remembered and called out the things that were important to them. And in a world today where there's so many kids out there who they might not have too many people who care enough to ask them about, hey, I remember that you just went out for the soccer team, or you just, you enjoy playing Fortnite. Yeah, like that might not seem like a big deal because it's just a video game, but it's so much more than a video game. It's what they care about.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah. Mhm.
man, I just love that, Brad. So good, man.
Yeah, it's been said that being heard and seen, and that's so close to being loved, that for most people it's the same thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's so true. Like when we really see a young person, we really hear them, we're loving them.
And I think especially today, Brad, we're like, I don't know about you, but I've never been more busy. Like
Mhm.
I like, and I kind of feel like everyone's just really busy. We've got jobs and we've got families and we got friends and we got commitments and we got our cell phones and we got the podcasts and the new books and and just like, what a great opportunity to show love by stopping and saying, no, 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 I don't care about any of that stuff right now. I care about you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And let's talk about you. And I'm going to put down my phone. I'm going to make eye contact and I'm going to take notes. Why? Because I care about you and I'm going to ask you about it. Like kids don't care what you know till they know that you care.
Mhm.
And man, you're speaking my language. That's all I'm trying to say.
It's good. I love it.
Man, man, so here's kind of something that I have a hard time with, right? Like you kind of want to toe this line of like, hey, we're here to create a safe environment. We're here to show you that we love you. We're all about identity and purpose. But at the same time, like you do want them to fulfill their potential. You want them to become all that God has. But I feel this kind of thing, Brad, where it's like, I feel like if I push too hard, then they'll feel like like I expect something out of them, right? Like, I don't want to put a, I don't want to put a bunch of pressure on my kiddo and make them feel like they have to get get these certain things right in order to spend time with me. So tell me how you engage with the identity and with the belonging and with the purpose without making a kid kind of feel like we're trying to fix them, right?
Mhm. Yeah. Fix is a really important word. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And so coming without a huge agenda is really huge here. So being a teenager, it's been said that there's the experience of being an adolescent is often like you feel like you're on a stage and all everybody's looking at you. There's sort of this flip, switch that flips from childhood into adolescence. And it's not just awareness of the other, it's like people are looking at you and they're watching you. And the thing that we heard in our interviews with teenagers over and over for this project is that it feels like people are watching me and they have all these expectations. And so there's all these expectations of me from these people and these people and these people. And that's not just adults, it includes friends, these different friend groups that I have to jump around between. They have all these different expectations. And then all the adults in my life have all these expectations. And so to be, and I mean, I think the best kind of mentor, the safest kind of space is the person who can come and lower the heat on the expectations and to create the kind of space where um, you can be who you need to be today. You can be in this conversation. What's it like to be you this week? You know, how how is that going? Like, what's on your heart this week? Um, what is it that you don't have to perform in this conversation is sort of what we're communicating. Because the other piece, part of that expectation and pressure comes from their digital lives and in social media. They're constantly having to present themselves in certain ways. And and that creates a whole other layer of pressure. And so to be in an environment where they can know and we can just keep affirming, you don't have to be this, curated version of yourself. You can be the raw version of you in this conversation. You also don't have to be like anybody else. You don't have anybody else's gifts or talents or story. God made you uniquely to be who you are, and you're figuring that out, and that's all right. That's okay. And you might feel different about who that is tomorrow. You're always going to belong here. You're always going to be. Um, you're always going to be okay right here. That it's just okay to be you. So I think that's just important for us to keep in mind that they may be coming into these conversations just feeling a lot of pressure from everywhere. This is so interesting, Zach, in our research. One of the things that really stood out when we talked to teenagers about belong, or when we listened to teenagers talk about belonging, we asked about where they feel like they can be themselves the most. And identity and belonging are so closely tied, so closely tied. And one of the biggest themes that we heard was when I feel safe to be me, I feel like I belong. And when I don't have to be fake, when I don't feel like I'm being judged, when I can say something and it doesn't have to be funny, when I can just essentially not be performing. And so if we can be the kind of relationship that's safe space where they don't have to perform, man, that is everything. That is everything.
Like I've found as a mentor, sometimes I'm so self-conscious. I'm so just like, I don't know if I should say that, but I think as I grow older and as I just grow more bold or more self-confident or more just, hey, I'm old and I don't care what anyone thinks, um, is just like being able to say that to a kid. Hey, I just want you to know that I love you, not for who you think I want you to be.
Yeah.
Or, hey, just it's awesome to see you. I just want you to know that you can be whoever you want to be, and I'm still here for you.
Yeah.
I mean, I just feel like us like saying those words, like, yeah, it might be kind of weird. Yeah, your kid might be like, okay. But like, I just feel like us as mentors to be able to say those things, regardless of how they respond, and just have faith that like you're speaking those God like ordained kind of truths of I I love you for you, period, end of story. It doesn't matter what kind of grades you make. It doesn't matter how you do in sports. It doesn't matter how you look. It doesn't matter what you do. You are loved because you are full of worth and value. And I'm here for you. I mean, that is such a not just a life transforming message if a kid can grasp that, but a generational changing message.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's such a big deal.
Yeah, and I think we can only be that when we are in that conversation, also communicating, "I don't need anything from you." Like, I don't need you, the kid, to affirm me, to, validate me, right? I don't need you to tell me I'm cool. Sometimes the best the best mentors, are those who are kinda socially awkward and don't care, you know? But for all of us to make sure we're getting our needs met somewhere else, that we are not looking to that young person to, to validate us or make us feel better about ourselves, and we're certainly not looking to them to solve our problems. We can be authentic about things that are going on in our life or struggling with. We just need to make sure there's a line there where that young person doesn't feel like they have to care for us in the relationship, um, because when they do, we're not as safe of a space. And they can't let their guard down as much because they feel like, "Oh, I gotta take care of this person." And let's be real, they have those adults in their lives. I mean, sometimes it's their parents. Sometimes they have a parent who they kinda feel like they have to care for, or they very literally do have to care for emotionally or physically or all of the above. And, especially for those young people, to have another relationship outside the home, where they can just let down, let it all down, like, that is invaluable.
I think one more thing, Brad, that we can do as mentors is like, yes, for sure, come to the relationship with our cups filled up. And we get that through our own spiritual life. We get that through our own sense of identity, purpose, and, surrounding ourselves with people who uh, can speak into us and who can kind of encourage us. But it is also just being able to model what we want them to do. So, like, that line of like, "Hey, we want them to be real and authentic, and we have to first, show them that ourselves." But exactly like what you said, in a way that is responsible, in a way that we're not making them feel like, they have to take care of us and all of that. Yeah, that's a great point. Um, Man, on kind of that topic of kind of kids feeling like an outsider, right?
Mhm.
Like, how can we as mentors kind of enter into that space and provide them, whether it's comfort or support, or if you could just kind of speak to that, think that that'd be helpful.
Yeah, and as we talked about earlier, I spent a lot of time feeling like an outsider as a teenager, so I can really identify that with that, and you used that term "with" before. This is a huge one that we want young people to remember, that we can pull into our mentoring this sense that no matter who's not with you, God is with you. Like, you always belong with God, that ultimately we're all looking for a safe space, and God is that safe space. Um, that we know that God will never reject us, God will never leave us alone, God will never see us as an outsider. We are always an insider with God. And that is good news to a young person, and at the same time, God is not here with us in the flesh right now, and so we need people to be here with us in the flesh, and so to encourage them, um, uh, to to find that community, to be part of a community. I mean, this is where when the church is at its best, when youth ministry is at its best, when mentoring is at its best, we're assuring them, when you follow Jesus, you're part of a bigger family. And that family is imperfect and it may let you down, but you always belong. You always belong. And I think the power of intergenerational community when it's functioning well, when it's healthy, is that young people can have that sense of home. I really think one of the gifts that we can give young people is a sense of home, a sense of home in God, and a sense of home with the people of God. Um, and so encouraging them and also reminding them Jesus was that outsider. Jesus never quite fit in anywhere, and he was rejected by his own people, even his own family at one point. And yet uh, he he was centered in his home with God the Father, and that we know that Jesus identifies with our pain when we get left out, and when we're really struggling or we feel like I don't even know who my friends are this week, or all my friends betrayed me. Jesus walked through that. Jesus walked through that, and so he could be close to us. Psalm 37 says, "God is close to the brokenhearted." That is Jesus can understand and identify with those deepest experiences of betrayal and of loneliness. Um, and we really are never alone.
Mm. I think that's one thing that I need to consistently remember, right? Like in almost every mentoring relationship, whether I want to or not, I always kind of feel this need of like, okay, this kid might not have anyone else. It's up to me, right? And I have to make sure that I come to every game and I got to do this, 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 this. And the truth is, like, the ultimate win in faith based mentoring is to get a kid into a church body. And it's exactly for the reasons that you just stated, right? Yes, you might be the best mentor out there, but what if you have to move? What if you get sick? What if you change jobs? What if all of a sudden your mentee just up and disappears, right? If we can teach them how to engage into the local church, then one, they always have a home. Wherever they go, they can go there and find people that care about them. I remember as a kid, I loved going to church, not going to the actual like services and things like that. That was super boring. But being in the church building, it was so weird, Brad. But as you speak, it's because that was kind of a home base,
Yeah.
right? Like my home was kind of crazy, but at least at church, I knew if I was going to be in that home or in that space, I was safe. And then going over to some of my friends' houses, I was like, man, I love going over to this house because I know it's safe because I know that I'm okay there. And so one, like, yes, introducing them to the person of Jesus Christ. I mean, Jesus is the only person who will never leave you, but also introducing them to church and the people of the church. That's just a great way to surround them with as many people as possible who can speak identity, who can give them a spot to say, "Hey, like this feels like home. This feels safe." So,
Mm, mm.
that's a big deal. But
Yeah. Yeah. It's a big deal.
is I'm just kind of curious, like, was there any other cool like pieces of pieces that came out of your interviews that you were like, "Oh wow, that's
Mm.
I didn't see that coming."
Yeah. Well, we haven't talked a lot about purpose yet. And that comes to mind with that question that,
Yeah, that's great.
in particular for older teenagers, so purpose is sometimes the last of the three that really kind of kicks in, right? And it elevates, but especially as we talk to kids who are juniors, seniors in high school, and they're trying to make decisions about their future. And we found a lot of anxiety and a lot of that they were getting a lot of mixed messages about that. And one thing that really stood out is well, two things. One, that teenagers find a lot of purpose in helping. That when they have this sense of, oh, I'm helping somebody else, whether it's helping their friends have a better day, whether it is helping in their family system, whether it is helping at church or, through service or school or whatever that is, like helping was just this huge theme, which makes a ton of sense, right? Like we're wired, I think, to to really feel purposeful when we're helping other people, when we're getting outside of ourselves. So that was one thing. The other thing is that there were a lot of scripts around purpose and future and calling that come from Christian community that are really well meaning, but sometimes amp up the pressure. And so I think in particular for Christian mentors, sometimes we use this language about calling and God's will and God's best for our life. And I remember one girl, she was 17, she was thinking about her future, and she was like, "I am so worried that I'm gonna choose the wrong major to study in college, and it's not gonna be God's best for me, and it's not gonna be God's will, and then I'm gonna waste these 4 years," and that she was talking in a way that made it sound like she was afraid she was gonna disappoint God with what she studied in college, and I feel so, I feel bad for kids who we give them this script and we're really well-meaning. I mean, of course, like, we wanna do God's will, right? But the reality is that this journey of calling, this journey of discovering God's will, for most of us, it unfolds over time. For most of it's not for most of us, it's not super clear. Um, for most of us, it's a mix. Our purpose is a mix of work and vocation and stuff outside of work. I mean, for some people who are listening, you might find more purpose in mentoring than you do in your regular job that you get paid for. Like, that's real for a lot of us, right? And so I think to help lower the pressure young people, that if your desire is to do God's will, God's gonna honor that. If your desire is to pursue what God has for you out there, God's not gonna leave you hanging. God's not gonna be disappointed if what you wanna do is discover who you were really made to be and to live that out on behalf, of the good of the world. If your desire is to go out and love God and love people, like, God's not gonna steer you wrong. You're not gonna get too far off course there. And so I think we could really do a lot of good with young people we're mentoring if we can help lower the pressure on some of that when it comes to purpose. And that, I think, was something that I didn't really expect that going into these conversations, that I walked away thinking, "Oh, yeah, we gotta get better at some of our language." Yeah.
And I can remember whenever I was getting serious about my faith, I had a guy who just said, "Hey, Zach, man, like, the Lord's will for your life is not some inch wide line that you're gonna fall off and miss it. Like,
Yeah.
God's will for your life is so broad that you can fall down and still hit it." Mm. And that really kind of transformed my life. Like,
Yeah.
I think about that word. I mean, that word happened 15 years ago, and I still think about it because there's times in my day I'm like, I don't know if I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I don't know if this is God's call or just something out of it. And I was like, no, no, no. I'm gonna take a breath. No, God's will for your life is is something that you're not gonna miss. And I think what a great opportunity we have as mentors to just, hey, let's take a deep breath. Let's chill out. Like, God works outside of time. Like, God's not like checking his watch and be like, hey, you should be over here by now and you're not. Like, um, and just talk to our mentees about patience and about like, hey, just one day at a time. Like,
Yeah.
God's faithful, um, and He who calls us is faithful. And so,
Mhm.
man, just
It's good.
such a great reminder. But yeah, so just like, how would you go about like if a teenager comes to you and he's like, "Hey, like I want to figure out my purpose." Then like what are some of the things that you would say to them to try to get them um trying to think about that
Mhm.
in a way that's helpful?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'd probably start with some of that, that we just talked about, just around loving God and loving others is our first call as people who follow Christ and who, when it comes to our purpose in the world. And then beyond that, I think there's some helpful wisdom out there. Howard Thurman, there's this beautiful quote Don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive, and then go do that. Because what the world needs is people who've come alive. And so I love asking young people, what gets you excited? What gets you energized? When do you come alive? And what do you notice about that? Like, what is there from that could help you think about your purpose and your future? What is it that really that you just get pumped up about, especially when it's something that maybe other people don't. That that's something to lean into. Is something to lean into as you kinda understand your gifts and your talents. And it's also really important to understand what you're not good at. Just because, you have a parent who's really good at math or at business or at whatever, you may not have those same skills. Just because your best friend is a really good writer, or they're really good with little kids. I mean, I have 3 kids. They're all really different, and I have one who just absolutely loves and gets fired up working with younger kids and, leaning into that and having opportunities to serve younger kids and to invest in them. I have another kid who that does not get them excited at all. And they'll do it if they have to, but it's not something that gets them excited. And, we don't need to judge that at all, like, just listening to that. Like, "Hey, listen to what gets you excited." Um, and roll with that. Roll with that. There's a young man in our church who he started helping out with a summer program that was, like, running this day camp because somebody had, asked him to help out, and out of that, he realized he just was so energized by working with kids. He ended up going to college and being an elementary education major because he got this sense of, "Oh, it's it's really fun to work with kids, and I get energized by these little kids." And he sort of realized, "Oh, that's not everybody, That's not everybody, but that is something that makes me come alive."
And kind of sounds like my story. So
Mm, it's great.
great, Brad. Hey, well, tell me how people can find out more about you and your books, and tell us again where they can pick up a copy if they'd like to, and all of that good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So 3bigquestionsbook.com will take you to everything about the books and about identity, belonging, and purpose. And then fulleryouth institute.org is more about our organization and tons of free resources.
It's awesome. I'll toss all of that good info in our show notes. But Brad, thank you so much for hopping on and taking time out of your busy schedule to give us some wisdom on mentoring, man. Really appreciate it.
For sure. Thank you, Zach. My pleasure.
Of course. Thank you all for tuning in today. If you guys missed out on all of this good stuff, you are, man, there's something wrong with you. But that doesn't mean that you, well, you can't mentor, but oh, I'm just going to end it. You can mentor. See y'all next time.